All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to take a look at how to solve the equilibrium problems. These are kind of similar to what the video about equilibrium was. I'm just going to go through some kind of specific things that you're going to want to do in order to solve these problems and get through these activities. So the first activity is very similar to some of the problems we've worked on. Instead of giving just a supply curve, a supply schedule, or a demand schedule, however, I've given you a supply and demand schedule. And what you're going to do is you're going to graph these two curves. So for the demand curve, you're going to use the first column, price per widget, and the second column, which is quantity demanded at that price. And you're going to graph these 2 points, plot them all, draw your curve, label it D. For the second curve, you're going to use the first column, price per widget, and the third column, which is quantity supplied, plot each point, connect them, label it S. Once you've done that, you're going to use a dotted line, okay? And that's going to indicate the equilibrium pricing quantity. This is called a drag. You're going to drag to each axis to show the price and quantity, and you're going to answer the questions below. So the first question, under these conditions, competitive forces would tend to establish an equilibrium price of 25 cents and an equilibrium quantity of 200. If the price currently prevailing is 30 cents per widget, buyers would want to buy, well, they would want to buy 150 million widgets. Sellers would want to sell, okay, at that price, sellers would want to sell 250. And there would be since the quantity sold exceeds the quantity demanded, there would be a surplus of 100 million widgets, okay? So there's 100 million widgets unsold at a price of 30 cents. That'd be right up here, okay? Competitive market forces would tend to cause the price to decrease, and they would decrease to 25 cents per widget because that's the equilibrium price. At this new price of 25 cents a widget, buyers would want to buy 200 million, sellers would want to sell 200 million, okay? So we're at equilibrium where quantity supplied, quantity demanded are equal. Now, F. At this price, or because of this change in price, we don't have an entirely new curve, okay? The curve isn't shifting here, so that's a change in price. The quantity demanded changed by 50 million, and the quantity supplied changed by 50 million, okay? So that's kind of the first step in this process. Now, I'm going to leave the second set to you. Now, in figure 2, it asks you to graph a new supply curve, okay? So here's my new supply curve down here. So it says, now suppose a mysterious blight causes the supply schedule for widgets to change. So here is my new supply schedule, and I'm just going to plot these points now. So 20 cents, it's 50. I'm going to label this one S1. I'm going to draw an arrow indicating the movement, and I'm going to go ahead and highlight my new equilibrium price, okay? So right now I'm working on figure 3, question number 2. Okay, plot the new supply schedule on the axis in figure 2, label it S1, label the new equilibrium price P1. Okay, I'll go ahead and call this one P1. Okay, under these conditions, competitive market forces would tend to establish a price of, well, now it's 30 cents per widget, and an equilibrium quantity of 150 million widgets. Compared with the equilibrium price in question 1, we say that because of this change in, this one will be underlying conditions, and the supply is changing, okay? The reason it's a change of supply, the entire curve is shifting to the left here. So when it's a change in price, you go from one point to another point. When it's a change of supply, the entire curve goes in one direction. And because of this, the equilibrium price increased and the equilibrium quantity decreased, okay? So now you're going to work on problem number, the second set, the shift of demand on your own, okay? So now part B. Part B is pretty straightforward. It asks you to fill in the letter of the graph that best answers the questions. Okay, so question number 1 says, what would happen in the market for jelly beans if the price of sugar increased? Well, sugar is an input into the production of jelly beans. Okay, without sugar, you can't have a jelly bean. So that's going to be a shift of supply. If an input cost goes up, supply has to decrease. So the best answer here is going to be A. Okay. The price of bubble gum, a close substitute for jelly beans, increases. Well, if people like bubble gum and they like jelly beans, okay, equally, and bubble gum is more expensive, I would expect consumers to buy more jelly beans, so that's going to be a shift of demand. The best answer is going to be C. And you guys can work on the rest on your own. This one's pretty straightforward. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at part C. Now, this one's a little more challenging. Okay, this is how do you graph multiple shifts? Okay, what happens when there's more than one shift happening in a single market at one time? Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to fully read the question, and one at a time, you're going to impact what this change does to prices. So, the question says, what will happen in the market for apples after the Surgeon General reports apples are linked to higher levels of cancer? That's 1. Pesticides used increase in price. That's 2. Fewer people order apple pies. That's 3. And a widespread blight ravages the apple tree population. That's 4. So we have 4 factors happening. Now, shift 1. Apples are linked to higher levels of cancer. I would expect demand to decrease. So I'll go from D to D1. Okay. Now, I'm not going to graph all this, but I'm going to say price goes down, quantity goes down. Now I'm going to come down here. What's the effect on price? Price falls, quantity falls. Shift 2. The pesticides used to treat apple trees increase in price. Well, pesticides would be an input. If input costs rise, supply shifts to the left. We'll go from S to S1. Okay. Price rises. This had been my price. That's my new price. Quantity falls. Okay. So I'm going to say price goes up. Quantity goes down. Shift 3. Fewer people order apple pie. Well, that'll cause a decrease in demand for apples. Shift to the left. Price goes down. Whoops. Price goes down. Quantity goes down. And 4. Widespread blight ravages apple trees. That's a shift of supply. That'd be a natural disaster. Okay. Supply shifts left. Price goes down. Scratch that. Sorry. Price goes up. Quantity goes down. So price goes up. Quantity goes down. Now take a look. Once you've lined these up, okay, price goes down, price goes up, price goes down, price goes up. The effect on price is ambiguous. I can't really say one way or another what happens to price. Quantity goes down, quantity goes down, quantity goes down, quantity goes down. We have 4 decreases in a row. I can say with certainty, quantity goes down. Okay? So remember, if you have questions about kind of my approach to doing this, you can check out that equilibrium video. I did a bunch of sample problems, but what you want to do is you always want to line up what happens to price and quantity. Now on to problem number 4, kind of the 4th set of problems that I had you guys do, part D. So this is a little different. In this scenario, what you're going to look at is how does a change in one market impact other markets? And to do this, you first have to start on the left and work your way left to right. Okay? You can't just kind of guess at it. You first have to analyze what's going to happen in the first market, then how does that chain to the second market, to the third market, and finally to the fourth market. So take a look at the first one. Assume a new fertilizer dramatically increases the number of potatoes that can be harvested with no additional labor or machinery. Also assume that this fertilizer does not affect wheat farming and people are satisfied to either eat either potatoes or bread made from wheat flour. Okay? So we have a bunch of interrelated markets. And we're going to start with the first change, which is this new fertilizer, which is going to increase the supply of potatoes. Okay? Supply of potatoes shifts to the right. Okay? Now, demand remains unchanged. Supply increases, equilibrium price decreases, equilibrium quantity increases. Okay? So here's my first effect. Now, potatoes are less expensive. So first you have to look at what's happening in this market. Potatoes are less expensive. How is that going to impact the market for bread? Well, the problem says bread and potatoes are substitute goods. People will eat either of them. Okay? So if potatoes are less expensive, I would expect people to eat more potatoes and less bread. Demand for bread is going to shift to the left. Demand decreases. Price decreases. Quantity decreases. Okay? Next, fewer people are eating bread. How is that going to impact the market for wheat? Now, these would be complementary goods, right? You have to buy wheat in order to make the bread. Okay? So, how does a change in the market for bread impact the market for wheat? Well, if fewer people are eating bread, I would expect the demand for wheat to decrease. Go from D to D1. Price goes down. Supply remains unchanged. And finally, we're harvesting less wheat because people are eating more potatoes now. Okay, so we don't need to make that bread. What's going to happen in the market for wheat harvesting machinery? Well, if we're harvesting less wheat, I would expect the market for wheat harvesting machinery to see a decrease of demand. So maybe some farmers are farming potatoes now instead. Okay, and I would expect demand to go down, price to go down, quantity to go down. So this set of problems is different from part C in that we're not looking at how a bunch of changes affects one market. We're looking at how one change affects the next market and affects the next market and affects the next market. So this is just kind of a simple little walkthrough of the Chapter 4, the equilibrium homework problems. We'll go through some of these problems in class, but hopefully this kind of gets you off on a good start.